And in the regimental diary for December 1916, there was a line: Germany put out peace feelers, which met with no response from the Allies. So December 1916, 2 years before the end of the war, Germany put out peace feelers, which we couldn't even be bothered to respond to. And because we didn't, 400,000 of our men were killed in the ensuing 2 years. But also, there was a daily cost of about £5.5 million a day the war was costing us. And in looking back at that, that was the time when we bankrupted the country. In 1914, we had an empire. We had the gold standard. The pound was worth $4.50. Britain owned the gold standard. We had investments all over the world. We were non-indebted. We came out of the war, all that broken. Industry, all our heavy industry gone, coal, shipping, steel, iron, all of it ruined because it had been put to different uses during the war. And the people who we were selling stuff to had found other sources. So we were basically on our knees. And the worst thing was, if you look at any of the colleges, we're not far from Oxford here. It breaks my heart to look at the colleges in Oxford or Cambridge, and you see all these lists of young men who have been sacrificed. We sacrificed the flower of our manhood. And that, for me, is where our country went down the pan. It's been a slow, inexorable struggle ever since, but we are still paying the cost of the intransigence and stupidity that actually drove the First World War. So I'm just about to finish. If you've enjoyed the talk, there's a couple of other talks that I do. One on the Irish War of Independence, which is Andy's second book. Within that, I do a talk on the contrasting role of women in war. Now, last question. Who was the first woman to be elected to the House of Commons? You fell into my trap. Yeah? Nancy Astor was the first woman to sit in the House of Commons. The first woman to be elected to the House of Commons was Countess Markievicz, who was an Irish woman, Sinn Féin candidate, and of course Sinn Féin being what it is, she didn't take her seat. But they both were around the sort of 1918, 1919, 1920 time frame. It's quite remarkable the different roles that women played in Britain to the roles that women played in Ireland in conflict. Another talk I do is Chalfont Sajays, a lovely parish church down there. And we do talks and tours. So we're looking at medieval wall paintings, Henry VIII, Cromwell, the Great Ejection. If you ever woke up at night wondering what that was all about, come down to the Chalfont Sajays and we'll explain. You've been a very, very kind, considerate audience. Despite the little hiccups at the end, this is one of the best organised U3As I've been to, Sarah. So to you all, thank you very much indeed.
Now let's see if this works. Oh, no, it doesn't. There you go. Thank you very much, sir. Oh, don't worry. Thank you very much. Obviously, I always feel weird. So thank you. Thank you. I always feel weird saying I enjoyed a talk like that, because you shouldn't enjoy a story about people dying and so on. But it was brilliant. Thank you so much. We have to get to tea and coffee quite quickly, otherwise we'll be shot. But has anybody got any questions before we disappear? Yeah. I'm afraid you're going to. Oh, thank you very much. If you can make it work, mate, I'll be forever grateful.
I don't need the microphone.
Oh, good woman. In that case, please shout.
I just thought it might be interesting to know how many people in the audience now have had ancestors who were actually involved in the First World War.
Good question. Hands up. It touched a lot of people.
I think I've got a unique one. My daughter was taken by her school to Somme, and they asked her that question, and she said, "Yes, teacher, on both sides." My wife comes from Czechoslovakia, and her grandfather fought on the piano.
Good heavens.
On my mother's side, we had a guy who was injured badly and died at Belleville Wood.
Melville Wood, I know it well. I know it well. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It touched a lot of people. You know, sometimes when I'm doing this talk, I ask a question as a kid, which is basically, put your hand up if you've got any connection with the Battle of the Somme. You've either got a relative or you've been on a battlefield tour. And you know, the number of times, it's just a sea of hands gets raised. It touched an awful lot of people. Sir?
Hi there. Would you mind just going over once more about these the stretcher bearers? I'm just shocked and I'm speechless at the fact that they were shot down.
Yeah, it is particularly poignant because, as I said earlier on, most of the stretcher bearers were men like James Mead from Chalfont St Giles, a lot of them were conscientious objectors, and conchies as they were called for short. They would go off and trying to do their bit to do the stretcher bearing, but by 1916, as I said, there's very, very little chivalry left. They shot our stretcher bearers, we shot theirs. The one bit of chivalry that came from the Somme, and it's worthy of maybe just covering it with you and answering your questions. On the 5th day, well, these men had been, lying out for 4 days wounded. On the 5th day, a RAMC, a medic on the British side, put a white flag on a stick and held it above the trench. And he waited for a minute and there was no shooting. And he and his mate then gingerly got out of the trench and stood on the parapet. And still there was no shooting. And then on the opposite side, a German came up with a handkerchief tied to a walking stick and raised it as well. And cut a long story short, the German came out of the trench, walked across no man's land. The British medics walked towards him. They met in the middle, saluted, and no words were spoken. The Germans then got another 15 or 20 men out behind, and they went and they picked up British casualties and ferried them back into the middle of no man's land, where the British could then pick them up and take them off to a dressing station. That's a very heartwarming piece of chivalry. But the only piece of chivalry that I've found in all... It's probably my fault I'm walking too far. I think we're done now. Question?
It's not a question, it's just a statement I'd like to make.
Yes.
I feel that you did a marvellous presentation, but it is something out of the side. You have to go back. Who started the First World War? Britain was the most reluctant to join a war. It was our good friends from Germany and Austria, and bugger all was going to stop them. So I do agree with some of the things you said there, some of the things that happened. But that's once wars occur. But like I've worked in probably 20 foreign countries, come back, and I consider Britain to be the most tolerant. It's not perfect, far from perfect, but my God, it's the most tolerant. It's quite extraordinary. If you go out to the bloody Middle East and you walk out there, it's hell, absolute hell, and absolutely no respect for prisoners and so on. So I do think what you said there was very, very indicative, but I think in the broader picture, the British, because of the empire, exactly the point you said, they had no interest in the bloody World War.
Yeah, I've worked in 20 or 30 countries as well, including the Middle East, and I don't disagree at all. I think the strength of British society is being put to the test at the moment, but the strength of our society has been, Britain as the average Briton is a pretty tolerant being, and the strength of our society is we've taken all these different people in. We've got a very plural, multi-denominational society. People can practice whatever religion they want. By and large, colour is no longer a facet anymore, although there are dark forces trying to change that. But I agree, we have been a very tolerant society, and long may that continue. All that said, when they put the peace feelers out in 1916, somebody should have done something about that. And that criticism is not levelled at the generals. That's actually levelled at what they call the frocks. So it was the politicians that would have overruled that, the Lloyd Georges and what have you.
Did the French accept the peace offer?
Sorry, say it again?
Did the French accept the peace offer? Did the French and Belgians accept it?
No.
Why?
I don't know if it was even made to them, to be honest. I'm
It
not.
was made. And you know why? Because they were occupying a large section, but most of Belgium.
I know what you're saying. Okay, I've got you. Yeah.
So you can't just say it's the British. In order for the British to accept the peace deal, the French and the Belgians had to accept the peace deal, and they didn't trust the Germans to leave.
Yeah, I take that. The only thing I would counter you with is that there's never been a successful peace without talking.
I agree with you.
Yeah, we should have talked. That's all. That's my only point.
As the war went on, the Germans got worse and worse. It started off as a regional position, and possibly the reason your ancestor joined wasn't just because of the brothers. The trouble is the reputation of the Germans became terrible. I'm not saying it was propaganda, of course, but a lot of it was true.
Yes. No, we. As part of the talk, sometimes I cover a gentleman called Tom Kettle, who was he actually was MP for my local constituency in Carlisle. He was a professor of economics at University College Dublin. He spoke 4 or 5 different languages. He was a man who would have made a deep impact on Irish history had he been allowed to live. He was actually in Belgium in 1914 at the start of the war. He was actually buying guns for the Irish volunteers to arm themselves against the Ulster volunteers. Everybody was getting tooled up for a war, particular war that didn't particularly happen, thank God. But in Belgium, he actually saw the German army come through. And he had a vision, he was generations ahead of him, so he had a vision for Ireland being an independent country in a prosperous Europe. And when he saw what the Germans did to Belgium, a big country running roughshod over a small country, he came back, and he was one of the most instrumental men in generating those 200,000 volunteers of Irishmen to volunteer for the fight.
I will say obviously it was not about the Nazis, right? The Nazis. It was fairly minor about the Nazis, but they were killing Belgian civilians
Yes.
in large numbers.
Yes.
Nothing like the German Nazis. But anyone who took a pot shot at them, they would kill a significant number of villagers in order to react to and stop any counterattack.
It was brutal, yeah. Absolutely brutal. No,
Yeah,
pushing an open door.
yeah. Can I just like
Yep.
the trees? No, let me. About the trees, I thought it
Yes.
might find interesting. The reason why the trees is a big deal, right, in the First World War, is because imagine you're a soldier and you've got all the trees is a big set of holes in the ground, right? Now, once it's filled, you've got 2 choices. You either dig up another load, right, but where do you put it? So, what they did was they got the pirates to dig out all the crap. So you
Literally.
actually had to dig out all the crap. Now, not surprisingly, the privates didn't want to do it because they got covered in crap, as you can imagine. Literally, it was a shitty job. There's no showers, there's very little water, and you're now covered in crap.
We can't hear this lady's question.
There is no question.
No, it's an observation. So,
But that's the reason why the trains were such a deal. The officers didn't like war for the men.
Sadly, most of us can't really hear you properly. So unfortunately, we should get you to do the talk, shouldn't we? You'd be very welcome, honestly, another time. Now, here's the thing. We're in the way of tea and coffee, and the ladies out there have been making it, and it will be going cold outside. Thank you so much for what you've done today. Shall we ring back? I take that as a yes then, we'll have him back, yeah. So here's the thing, we now need to do boring things like stack chairs. Two things quickly. We've got an introduction to artificial intelligence on Friday. Do come along and join me if you can, because it'll be good, and they'll be in here. In the meantime, can we stack the chairs, please, except the 3 rows at the back, into loads of 5? And for goodness sake, go and get tea and coffee and biscuits. Otherwise, those poor people have done it for nothing.